Joining us now, Jim Leggette, lecturer of economics, Mississippi State University. Jim, good to see you, sir.
Morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So wanted to have you on to give us your thoughts on this rather sticky inflationary environment that we have and just other economic matters as well. I guess the big news that really spurred lots of buying in the markets yesterday was Fed Chairman Jerome Powell signaling a bit of a moderate tone with respect to future rate hikes, indicating maybe we'll see half a point coming up in December, and then maybe subsequently we could be in line for even quarter point increases. But he also made it very clear that we ain't done, that we got a long way to go, I think was the terminology he used. But the markets still love that. We saw lots of green, and the Dow ended up closing up 700 and some odd today. It's given back some of that profit. What do you think about all this? It seems to be lots of conflicts, and every economist has a different view. What do they say? You got to have two hands to be an economist, right? Because you've always got, on the other hand.
Yeah. Harry Truman said, give me a one-handed economist.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think what the chairman was reacting to, I think the first question is, breaking the back of inflation is a really challenging task, and that's kind of one of those things. It's kind of like the best way to get your car out of a ditch is not get in it. And you and I looks like we're approximately the same age. We paid an awful price for getting rid of inflation in the early 80s.
Yep.
And what I think the Fed is reacting to is there are some glimmers that maybe this thing is working, but you can't declare victory just because you're winning a basketball game at the first media timeout. And of course, stock markets don't like higher interest rates for lots of reasons.
Right.
But I think if Chairman Powell is channeling his hero, Chairman Volcker, he knows it has to be diligent, and it's like a lot of things in life. You kind of have to pay the price early, or otherwise the price gets big. And the Fed's real challenge is you can't go too hard or too strong, and you're trying to reach that gentle path. In the 90s, they had a term I like called the Goldilocks economy. Now, whether they achieve that or not, who knows? If he achieves that, we'll put a statue next to him, next to Volcker. If not, he goes with some of those who went before. Certainly Volcker and Greenspan, in my mind, did what the Fed's supposed to do. Is okay. It's kind of okay for like 25 years. And that was pretty neat.
Right. So we did see, I think just this morning, some reports on October consumer spending, which a bit surprisingly was still strong. Still strong. I think that Americans they're still fairly liquid. Although we are seeing a fairly sharp increase of consumption using credit. That's up to high levels we haven't seen in some while. But heck, Jim, the Fed target is 2% inflation. And while we've seen that trimmed a little bit from the 8.3% or so high in the last few months, we got a long way to go, as Powell said. My concern, and want to get your take on this, really the main tool the Fed has is interest rates. They're in charge of monetary policy. How do we tame inflation without fiscal policy to boost supply?
The short answer is you don't. Because when you kind of logically think through this, the Fed can only do so much because interest rates really means the money supply. But if the fiscal policy is running up debt without impunity, you're never going to get there. And if you dig into this stuff, what you find at periods of high inflation, particularly hyperinflation, fiscal policy plays a role in it. And the classic case is the Weimar Republic, which was Germany post-World War I. Ponder this, 29,500% in 1 month. So basically what that means for our listeners, if you had any money October 1, by about October 10th, you're wiped out. And then, of course, what's worse is that basically destroys that society. And then you got Herr Hitler. And let's also remember, why I think sound money is so important. when the Soviet Union collapsed, everybody thought the world was going to be better off, and they went through a round of inflation, basically destroyed whatever middle class you had, and longing for stability. The Russian people chose Vladimir Putin as their leader. So lest we think this economic stuff is just something people who make up exams for you to study, political, just came up with two examples where periods of inflation basically changed the course of history.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hadn't really thought of it from that angle, but that makes total sense. I'm watching various market analysts, and yesterday I caught one who said that they look for a reputable investment analyst that said they look for the S&P to decline by as much as 25% in the first half of 23, sitting at just under 4,000 right now. We're talking about down to just over 3,000 should that occur. And that would throw a shock, obviously, into the market. Others are predicting a short-term Santa Claus rally coming up here in the next few days, and then a decline. Yeah, which is typical this time of year. But they're all trying to second guess what is the Fed going to do, but more importantly, what's inflation going to do? Because at this point, it's had a minimal. The Fed's action has had a minimal impact on inflation.
And in fact, the point to remember is, let's say the Fed message change. The studies indicate that's a 6 to 18 month lag before it kicks in. Okay, yeah. And they started, if I remember correctly, this in April. Might have been more, but doesn't matter for the point of this discussion. If it's 6 months, you're just seeing a tidbit of it. And the challenge the Fed has is, given that period, is they may overshoot the target. Now, I think that's those folks who are pessimistic saying is, okay, by the time all that kicks in, you've solved one problem, now you're getting another problem. And that's why folks kind of like myself make the argument, you're not going to fine-tune the economy because it is too complex of a thing. And just kind of leave things alone and just let the ups and downs kind of ride a little bit, because you may end up exacerbating. An analogy that my students kind of like is, and I suspect a lot of our listeners fancy themselves as barbecue pit masters. And you know how building a fire is for smoking meat, is it's got to hit it just right. And if you throw on too much wood too quickly, it doesn't do anything, and then it flames up and you burn whatever wonderful meat you were going to have. And I think that's the best way to think about what the Fed does, because, as you pointed out, inflation's its own beast, and we have a world with 8 billion people and an economy that's worth around $20 trillion. A bunch of computers and reasonably smart people in D.C. aren't going to be able to figure this out. Now, if you had a stock market for next year at this time, you and I'd be sitting on an island, right?
That's right. Well, the other thing that Powell noted, a couple of minutes left, get your thoughts on this, was that we still have 1.7 job openings for every worker looking for a job. So we still have a very tight labor market. And let's be honest, the goal with the increase in the rates is to take people out of the labor market, to take them out of the ranks of being employed, so they have less money to fuel inflation. So what's the answer here?
Kind of think about what's unemployment 3.7 right now. I suspect for the last year plus, our economy has been running past its capacity. And there's something called the natural rate of unemployment.
Yes.
And it's somewhere between 4 and 4.5, probably closer to 4.5. And think about any machine you can think of. If you run it over its capacity for very long, it doesn't end well. And for an economy, it means inflation. For your car engine, you blow it up.
Well, I don't think he's going to really stop with a hawkish approach until he sees that unemployment number tick up more. I mean, this are two big things they look at, right? That and, of course, inflation. And at this point, I don't think he's seeing what he wants to, although he's trying to walk a fine line and not tip us into a serious so-called hard landing, a recession. But a tall order, to say the least, Jim. Appreciate you coming
And
on.
that's why I
Enjoyed
kind
it.
of made my statement earlier. The best way to get out of the ditch is not get into it.
Great point. Appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for coming on.
All right, you guys have a good one. Enjoy your holiday, and we'll have it figured out by the next time.
I hope so. I hope so. Yes, sir. You too. Middays will step aside. Coming right back from the Element Wealth Studio.